Somewhere in the distant past, long before cities, books, or even the first written language, a young girl stepped away from her family's camp as the sun began to rise. The morning looked no different from any other. Birds called from the trees, smoke drifted from a dying fire, and the rest of her group prepared for another day of searching for food. Then she noticed something unusual. There was blood. She hadn't been injured. She hadn't fallen. Nothing hurt. Yet there it was, something she had never experienced before. For a moment, imagine standing beside her. No mirrors, no schools, no internet, no doctor's office. No one had ever sat her down to explain what was happening to her body. How would she have understood it? It's impossible to know exactly what she felt. Fear, confusion, curiosity, perhaps all three at once. That single moment has likely happened millions of times throughout human history. Every generation, for tens of thousands of years, young girls reach the same stage of life without modern medicine or products that today many people take for granted. Yet surprisingly, this ordinary human experience rarely appears in documentaries about ancient life. We often hear about mammoth hunts, stone tools, and cave paintings. We learn how early humans made fire or crossed continents. But one question almost never comes up. How did prehistoric women experience one of the most important biological changes of their lives? The truth begins with something much bigger than age. Today, many people think puberty simply arrives on a birthday, as though the body follows a calendar. Evolution works very differently. The human body constantly measures whether enough energy is available to support growth and, eventually, reproduction. Think of it like a careful survival system. If food is scarce for months, if the body burns more energy than it gains, development can slow down. Growing up is expensive. From nature's perspective, reproduction only becomes possible once the body has enough stored resources to safely support it. Scientists have spent decades studying this relationship. Although researchers still debate the exact numbers, one idea has remained remarkably consistent. Nutrition, physical activity, and overall health all influence when puberty begins. That leads to an interesting question. If life in prehistory demanded constant movement, endless walking, hunting, gathering, and surviving unpredictable seasons, did teenagers reach puberty at the same age they do today? Probably not. Anthropologists studying traditional hunter-gatherer societies have often found that girls experience their first menstrual cycle later than the average seen in modern industrialized countries. Their lives involve greater physical effort, leaner diets, and fewer excess calories. Of course, prehistoric people weren't identical to any living community, so we can't simply assume the numbers were exactly the same. But the evidence suggests something important. Growing up in the Ice Age probably happened more slowly than many people imagine. Now picture that young girl again. She isn't living inside a cave all day, as movies often portray. Her family travels with the seasons. Some days they sleep beneath rocky shelters. Other nights they build temporary camps near rivers or forests. She already helps collect edible plants, carries water, watches younger children, and learns the skills needed for survival. Then, one ordinary morning, childhood quietly begins to disappear. Here's where honesty matters. No archaeological discovery tells us exactly how she reacted. No diary survives from 30,000 years ago. Nobody carved her thoughts into stone. Whenever someone confidently claims prehistoric girls believed one specific thing about menstruation, they're filling gaps with imagination. History doesn't always give us complete answers. Instead, researchers compare many traditional societies recorded by anthropologists over the past centuries. While every culture developed its own customs, one pattern appears again and again. The first menstrual cycle was rarely ignored. Sometimes it marked the beginning of new responsibilities. Sometimes families held ceremonies. In certain communities, girls spent time separated from the rest of the group before returning as recognized young women. Elsewhere, older women became teachers, explaining what this new stage of life meant. Not every tradition was positive. Not every tradition was negative, but across many different cultures, the event carried meaning. That alone challenges a common modern assumption. Today, menstruation is often treated as something awkward or embarrassing to hide. Yet many ancient societies viewed it simply as another important transition in human life. Could prehistoric communities have done something similar? Maybe, but no honest historian can claim certainty. Some questions remain beautifully unanswered. Another Mystery follows immediately afterward. How? Did women actually manage menstruation without modern products? At first glance, it seems like archaeology should answer that easily. In reality, it's one of the hardest questions researchers face. The problem isn't a lack of curiosity. The problem is time. Most materials that ancient people used every day were organic. Soft grasses, moss, bark fibers, animal skins, woven plant materials, leather. These things don't usually survive for thousands of years. Rain destroys them. Bacteria consume them. The earth slowly recycles them back into nature. Stone tools remain. Bones remain. Pottery survives, but soft materials almost disappear. Imagine someone discovering your home 5,000 years from now. Plastic might survive. Metal could survive. But paper towels, clothing, tissues, and blankets would mostly vanish. The same challenge exists for prehistoric archaeology. Researchers therefore rely on careful reasoning rather than direct proof. Early humans already used soft moss to cushion objects, treated animal hides into flexible leather, twisted plant fibers into ropes, and understood which natural materials absorbed moisture because these materials served many daily purposes. Scientists think they may also have been useful during menstruation. Notice the wording may have. Not definitely. That difference matters. Good history separates evidence from assumption. Eventually, written history begins, and suddenly the picture becomes much clearer. Ancient Egyptian medical texts dating back nearly 4,000 years include discussions about women's health, fertility, pregnancy, and menstrual cycles. Rather than ignoring these subjects, physicians carefully recorded observations that they believed were medically important. Centuries later, Greek doctors expanded those discussions even further. They examined anatomy, childbirth, reproductive health, and many conditions affecting women. Some advice seems strange today because medical knowledge was still developing. Other recommendations sound surprisingly familiar, including suggestions for rest during especially difficult periods. Even so, something interesting remains missing. The medical texts survived. The products themselves mostly did not. Once again, the materials disappeared long before archaeologists could find them. This explains why so many popular internet claims deserve skepticism. You may have heard that ancient women definitely used one specific plant or one exact material. Sometimes those stories spread across social media thousands of times. But tracing them back often reveals surprisingly little evidence. History is rarely as certain as viral posts make it seem. The real story is usually more fascinating because it accepts uncertainty instead of pretending every mystery has already been solved. Then, after hundreds of thousands of years of human history, something extraordinary happened. Modern menstrual products appeared astonishingly late. Commercial pads only became available near the end of the 19th century. Even then, many people felt too embarrassed to buy them openly. Advertising remained cautious because society considered the subject inappropriate for public conversation. Everything changed during the First World War. Nurses caring for wounded soldiers noticed that certain medical dressings absorbed blood far better than ordinary cloth. That observation inspired new ideas for personal hygiene products after the war ended. Within only a few decades, menstrual care transformed faster than it had during the previous thousands of years combined. Think about how incredible that timeline really is. Our species has existed for hundreds of thousands of years. For almost all of that time, women relied on experience, knowledge passed between generations, and whatever natural resources surrounded them. Modern disposable products represent only the tiniest fraction of that enormous history. If every year of human existence were compressed into a single calendar, today's menstrual products would appear only in the final moments before midnight on the very last day. That perspective changes everything. It's easy to assume the conveniences around us have always existed. They haven't. Nearly every comfort we consider ordinary today would have seemed unimaginable to our distant ancestors. Yet despite having none of those advantages, prehistoric women continued raising families, traveling across continents, surviving ice ages, adapting to changing climates, and helping build the foundations of every civilization that followed. Their lives weren't defined by a single biological process, but neither were they untouched by it. It was simply another challenge woven into the much larger story of being human. Perhaps that's the most remarkable lesson of all. History isn't only shaped by kings, battles, or great inventions. It's also shaped by millions of ordinary moments that almost nobody recorded, moments experienced quietly by people whose names have been forgotten, but whose lives made ours possible. Somewhere, long before history had a beginning, a young girl looked down in confusion. Someone older probably noticed. Someone likely offered reassurance. Life continued. The seasons changed, generations passed, and without realizing it, those countless forgotten women carried one of humanity's oldest stories forward, 1 month at a time, until eventually it reached us.